So good morning, students. On behalf of Physiology Department, I again welcome you to the lecture series. These days have been quite tough for us, both physically as well as mentally. But just as they say, that life has to go on. So we are using this new technology to start up again with our new series of lectures in physiology. Now in the last lectures on endocrinology, we have already studied about mechanism of hormone action, growth hormone, thyroid hormone, parathyroid hormone, and calcium homeostasis. We had even covered adrenal cortex first part to some extent, but because of this corona crisis, many of the students were unable to attend the lecture. So, just to brush up the entire thing again, I will be covering the first part and then we will connect it to the second part. So, please be attentive and we will again enjoy this new technology for imparting the knowledge. So, let us start with today's very interesting topic, that is adrenal cortex. Some students are still entering, so I have not started with the lecture yet. Once they get admitted, everybody gets admitted, then we will be starting the lectures. I request all the students to unmute themselves as well as mute their video also. So there is no distraction in this lecture. So let us start with the lecture. So as you know, there are two adrenal glands which are present on the superior aspect of both the kidneys and they weigh around 5 grams in weight. They are called adrenal or suprarenal because of their typical anatomical location. Now, coming to the adrenal gland morphology in details, we had seen that it is composed of 3 layers. If you take a cut section, it is composed of 3 layers. Before that, the outer one is the cortex. One should know that the outer layer of adrenal gland is cortex, while the inner 15% is medulla. This cortex is mainly concerned with secretion of steroid hormones, whereas medulla is mainly concerned with secretion of catecholamines. So in today's lecture, we are going to mainly concentrate upon adrenal cortical hormones, that is the steroid hormones. So very, very important topic. Now, as you know that this adrenal cortex is composed of 3 layers. Zona glomerulosa, which is mainly concerned with secretion of mineralocorticoids like aldosterone. Second is the main bulk. The middle one is the main bulk, which is zona fasciculata, and it is mainly concerned with secretion of glucocorticoids and to some extent also androgens. The inner one is zona reticularis, and it is mainly concerned with secretion of adrenal androgens and to some extent glucocorticoids. Now talking about this hormones in details, which are the mineralocorticoids. These mineralocorticoids are the hormones which are mainly taking part on mineral metabolism. So remember, they affect on mainly the mineral metabolism, and the hormones are, you should know the names of all the hormones, especially aldosterone, which is the principal mineralocorticoid. So this aldosterone, deoxycorticosterone, corticosterone, 9-alpha fluorocortisol, cortisol, and cortisone. So these are the mineralocorticoids. Second category is glucocorticoids. They have effect mainly on carbohydrate metabolism. These are cortisol, corticosterone, cortisone, prednisone, methylprednisone, and dexamethasone. The principal glucocorticoid is cortisol. So remember, this cortisol is of utmost importance. The third category of hormones is androgens, and the hormones belonging to this androgen category are dehydroepiandrosterone and androstenedione. Now, we will consider what is the pathway of synthesis of the steroid hormones. So, if you see this diagram from Guyton, you will feel slightly confused. But remember, as students, you are not supposed to remember the chemical structure. Remember this, as a physiology students, you are not expected to remember this entire chemical structure. Just remember the product. For example, let us consider production of this aldosterone. This cholesterol is converted to pregnenolone by this desmolase enzyme. This pregnenolone in turn is converted to progesterone. This progesterone is then converted to 11-deoxycorticosterone, which is converted by this hydroxylase enzyme to corticosterone, and this corticosterone is then converted to aldosterone. Okay, so even if you remember the principal products, then also it is sufficient for writing in physiology paper. However, this pregnenolone is not only converted to progesterone, but under the influence of 17-alpha hydroxylase, it can be converted to 17-hydroxypregnenolone. Similarly, this progesterone can be converted to 17-hydroxyprogesterone. Similarly, this 17-hydroxypregnenolone can be converted to 17-hydroxyprogesterone, and 17-hydroxyprogesterone is then converted to 11-deoxycortisol, which is then converted to cortisol. Okay. What about androgens? This 17-hydroxypregnenolone is converted to dehydroepiandrosterone, while 17-hydroxyprogesterone is converted to androstenedione. This dehydroepiandrosterone is then converted to androstenedione. So finally, the principal product of mineralocorticoids is aldosterone. From glucocorticoids is cortisol, while androstenedione and dehydroepiandrosterone are the major androgens. Now, what are the physiological actions of aldosterone? Very, very important. All of you must remember from your exam point of view also. This is very important. So, the main action of aldosterone is increased renal reabsorption of sodium and secretion of potassium, and it mainly acts on the principal cell of collecting tubules and distal tubules. So how actually this takes place? The sodium absorption is coupled with potassium excretion when the pH is 7.4. So this is the antiportal system which is present in the kidneys, where sodium is reabsorbed while potassium is excreted, but when pH is 7.4. However, when in conditions of acidosis, This sodium reabsorption is coupled with excretion of mainly hydrogen, because now in order to achieve homeostasis, our body tries to expel hydrogen. So in conditions of acidosis, sodium will be reabsorbed, but hydrogen will be excreted. Second action is reabsorption of sodium from fluid in GIT. So as kidneys, the sodium is absorbed from the fluid in GIT. Same thing applies to sweat glands and salivary glands, where there is reabsorption of sodium and potassium is secreted. So all in all, aldosterone tries to conserve sodium while it tries to excrete potassium. Now this aldosterone also acts on hypothalamus to increase the thirst. So what do you think might be the effect on extracellular fluid volume? Here, sodium is reabsorbed. Along with it, it will also take water along with it. Secondly, because of increase in the thirst, there will be an increase in the ECF volume, which leads to increased blood pressure. So under normal physiological conditions, this aldosterone will be secreted in response to decrease in blood pressure. So whenever the blood pressure will decrease, it will cause more increased reabsorption of sodium, as well as hypothalamus will be stimulated to increase the water intake, and then it will bring the blood pressure back to normal. However, under certain pathological conditions, for example, in tumor where aldosterone secretion is excess, those patients will definitely reveal increase in blood pressure because of the excess activity of aldosterone. Now, how exactly this aldosterone acts at the cellular level? Now, we have already studied mechanism of hormone action in the very first lecture. If you remember, this hormone is a lipid soluble hormone. So this hormone enters the target cells and binds with the receptors in the cytoplasm. Okay. So it is a lipid soluble hormone. Now this hormone receptor complex enters the nucleus and it binds with specific area of DNA. And as you know, later on, this activation, it causes activation of transcription of specific DNA to form mRNA. And this mRNA diffuses in cytoplasm and it promotes translation to form new proteins. Now, example, which proteins? It causes formation of new proteins or enzymes like sodium potassium ATPase, where in basolateral membrane of renal tubular cells. So, because of that increase in this enzyme, it facilitates reabsorption of sodium at the basolateral membrane of renal tubular cells. Now, how this aldosterone is regulated? Now, we might feel that since it is increasing the reabsorption of sodium, the principal stimulus for release of aldosterone might be hyponatremia, that is decreasing sodium. But remember, the principal stimulus for secretion of aldosterone is not hyponatremia, but actually it is hyperkalemia. Serum potassium increase will cause several fold increase in aldosterone secretion, and this aldosterone secretion then will bring about sodium reabsorption, but at the same time, as you know, it will cause excretion of undesirable potassium levels and it will try to bring potassium back to normal. So the principal stimulus is rise in serum potassium. Secondly, the role of renin-angiotensin system. Renin is released from Golgi cells of afferent arteriole. Now, what are the stimuli for secretion of renin? So, decrease in blood pressure, number one. Number two, decrease in blood volume perfusing the kidneys. There is decreased serum sodium, or in case of sympathetic stimulation, this renin will be released from the Golgi cells of afferent arterioles. If you want to get a clear vision of the regulation of aldosterone, we can see this in this particular graph. For example, this chart shows that whenever there is an increase in the potassium load, it will act on this adrenal gland to cause release of aldosterone. This atrial natriuretic peptide is the hormone which normally causes inhibition of aldosterone, because this atrial natriuretic peptide, when it is released when there is an increase in sodium levels. So this will actually cause inhibition of adrenal glands. So there will not be any further release of aldosterone to increase ECF volume and blood pressure. Secondly, in conditions of the hemorrhage or upright posture, if a person gets up from its say a sedentary posture or a lying down posture, or in conditions where there is sodium deprivation, what will happen to the ECF volume? The ECF volume will decrease, and therefore, as we have already discussed, there will be release of renin from these GG cells. And what does this renin do? This renin will cause conversion of this angiotensinogen, which is released from the liver, to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 is converted by this converting enzyme in the lungs to angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 will then stimulate the adrenal gland to cause release of aldosterone. So in exam, if you don't get sufficient time to write everything, you can use such flowcharts which will be helpful to you to convey all the information, but in less time. So how this synthesis and secretion of ACTH takes place. Now, as we know that the stimulus for release of ACTH is actually the corticotropin releasing hormone or corticotropin releasing factor from the hypothalamus. But remember, the stimulus which causes this ACTH of synthesis also causes first formation of this precursor, which is known as pro-opiomelanocortin. This pro-opiomelanocortin then is cleaved to ACTH, which is released from the anterior pituitary, and it is also cleaved into MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone, beta lipoprotein, and beta endorphins, which are mainly released from pars intermedia. So remember, whenever there is an increase in ACTH production, there is an increase in the POMC derived hormones as well, because the same gene which causes transcription of mRNA to cause ACTH, it will also cause formation of the precursor POMC. And therefore, when there is rise in ACTH production, there will be simultaneous rise in other hormones like melanocyte stimulating hormone, which will stimulate formation of melanin, and this melanin then disperses to the epidermis, causing pigmentation of the skin. So any condition where ACTH production is increased, that patient will show you pigmentation of the skin because of simultaneous rise in MSH. However, there is one school of thought which says, which suggests that this ACTH itself causes hyperpigmentation of the skin. So there is another school of thought that irrespective of MSH, this ACTH is also capable of producing pigmentation of the skin. Now, how this glucocorticoid secretion is regulated? Let us see the feedback mechanism. Now, as you know, that regulation or secretion of glucocorticoids is under the control of ACTH from the anterior pituitary, which in turn is under the control of CRH from hypothalamus. Now, this ACTH once released, the receptors for this ACTH are present on zona fasciculata and zona reticularis, and it will cause activation of enzymes which causes formation of adrenocortical hormones from the adrenal cortex. Now, which are the stimuli which will cause release of this ACTH from the anterior pituitary? So any pain, anesthesia, surgery, hemorrhage, stress. So any stress here will excite the hypothalamus. This hypothalamus, as you know, it will cause release of the CRH into the median eminence. This CRH is then carried by the hypothalamo-hypophageal portal vessels to the anterior pituitary cells. Here, this CRH will cause release of ACTH. This ACTH then will act on adrenal cortex to cause release of cortisol. Now, this cortisol by causing certain metabolic arrangements like gluconeogenesis, protein mobilization, fat mobilization, or stabilization of lysosomes, it causes relief of stress. So this stress, which was exciting the hypothalamus to cause CRH, it is relieved. Not only this, the cortisol itself has got a separate feedback mechanism where it causes inhibition of release of ACTH from the anterior pituitary, as well as it causes inhibition of release of CRH. So, what are the various physiological actions of glucocorticoids? Let us see. Very important. In physiological doses, we will be seeing the metabolic actions as well as actions on different systems. Physiological doses means under normal circumstances or under normal secretory conditions, we will be seeing which are the various metabolic actions of glucocorticoids and which are the various actions on the different systems. However, sometimes one has to administer glucocorticoids out from outside for some pharmacological therapy part. So, we will be also seeing what are the actions of glucocorticoids in pharmacological doses. For example, during stress, how this anti-inflammatory action takes place, how the immunosuppressive action of glucocorticoids is beneficial, and how various anti-allergic actions are also important. So let us start with the physiological doses and the metabolic actions. Very important, all of you be please attentive. So what is the effect of glucocorticoids on this carbohydrate metabolism? So you have to enumerate it likewise. It causes increased gluconeogenesis. That means it causes formation or synthesis of new glucose. It increases the enzymes that are required to convert amino acids into glucose in liver cells. Also, it causes mobilization of amino acids from extrahepatic tissues. And these mobilized amino acids are then converted to glucose in the liver cells. So all in all, on carbohydrate metabolism, you can say there is an increase in the glucose production. Also, this increase in glucose will lead to increase in glycogen storage in liver. To make the matter worse, this glucocorticoids causes decreased utilization of glucose by the tissues. That means the tissues are unable to respond to insulin. So a sort of insulin resistance is developed under the influence of glucocorticoids. And therefore, what is going to happen now? The glucose are not able to enter the cells because of the insulin resistance. There is formation of new glucose and glycogen. So all in all, it will lead to an increase in the blood sugar level. This increase in blood sugar level will stimulate insulin secretion, but there will be reduction in sensitivity to insulin. So what is going to happen over a long term, if the glucocorticoid action persists, this increase in the blood sugar level will cause the pancreas to release more and more insulin, but it is hardly of any use. But there will come a time where the pancreatic beta cells will get exhausted of producing insulin. So what is going to happen now? There it will lead to a condition known as adrenal diabetes, that is increase in the blood glucose of 50% or more above normal. Do you remember which is the other hormone which causes increase in the blood sugar level, which we had discussed previously? Yes, the hormone which was causing pituitary diabetes was growth hormone. However, remember, a prolonged glucocorticoid action can also lead to a condition which is known as adrenal diabetes. Secondly, what is the action on protein metabolism? On protein metabolism, normal levels or basal levels are essential for maintenance of normal contractility of skeletal and cardiac muscle. This is about normal levels. However, in conditions where the glucocorticoids level exceed, it will cause increased protein catabolism, as we have seen. And these amino acids which are mobilized are then converted to glucose. Not only this, there will also be inhibition of protein synthesis. So whenever you are administering any glucocorticoid therapy to any patient, you have to take into consideration these bad effects on protein as well as carbohydrate metabolism. So one has to be very vigilant when you are administering glucocorticoids to a patient. What is the action on fat metabolism? It causes lipolysis, that is, it causes increase in the free fatty acids. And these free fatty acids are deposited on face as well as the shoulder. So there will be a redistribution of fat. What will be the effect on mineral metabolism? As we have seen that cortisol has got slight mineralocorticoid activity as well. So same like aldosterone, it will cause a retention of sodium, while it will cause excretion of potassium, that is slight mineralocorticoid activity as well. So in short, how will you summarize this glucocorticoid action? First of all, let us concentrate upon this figure. This figure shows that no glucose is able to enter muscle because of the insulin resistance. No glucose is able to enter the fat tissue because of the insulin resistance. So that will lead to an increase in the blood sugar level. Secondly, no amino acids are taken up by the proteins. In fact, this protein is mobilized to form amino acids, and these amino acids are then taken up by the liver to form new glucose. Not only this, this cortisol or the glucocorticoids acts on triglycerides, causing lipolysis, leading to formation of free fatty acids. So, how to summarize the action of cortisol in 3 words? It is catabolic under excess doses, it is diabetogenic, and it is a lipolytic hormone. So these are the 3 keywords which all of you must remember to remember the overall effect of cortisol on the various body metabolism. Now moving to the next part, action of glucocorticoids on various systems. Now we are talking about the basal levels, normal physiological doses. So on central nervous system, what is the effect of glucocorticoids on CNS? There is an increase in cortisol just before awakening, which is important for normal arousal and initiation of daytime activity. So remember, this cortisol concentration is highest in the morning. If you give corticosteroids from outside, that patient might suffer from certain psychological disorders like mood changes, or he might not be able to sleep. That is known as insomnia. On blood, what is the action of glucocorticoids on blood? It causes depression of lymphocytes, that is lymphocytopenia. It also causes monocytopenia. It also decreases the eosinophil count. That means it has got this very nice anti-inflammatory action, which we are going to make use of when we are treating the patient. However, by certain unknown mechanism, it causes increase in the platelet count, that is thrombocytosis, and also it increases the production of RBCs. So the mechanism behind this thrombocytosis and increased production of RBCs is not known, but yes, this glucocorticoids in normal quantity is required for erythropoiesis. So remember this. Coming to the action on the bones, yes, very, very important. It decreases bone formation. It increases bone resorption. Now we have seen that glucocorticoids causes mobilization of amino acids. So this osteoporosis, that is for there is decrease in the collagen matrix because of under the influence of these glucocorticoids. And this is the precise reason why one should be very vigilant in administering glucocorticoids to patients who are under the age of say 15 or 16, because in children there, that is the age where the bone formation, bone lengthening, bone thickening is taking place. If you give glucocorticoids to that particular age group, it will not only cause a decrease in the muscle mass, but it will also cause decrease in the bone formation, and it will increase the bone resorption. And this is the main reason why we particularly try to avoid giving glucocorticoids in children under the age of 15, 16, especially because of this bad effect on the bone formation. On CVS, what is the action? It maintains the tone of blood vessels along with adrenaline and noradrenaline. It increases the blood pressure while it causes inhibition of healing, because it inhibits collagen synthesis and wound healing. So this again is a bad effect, which is undesirable effect as far as wound healing is concerned. Now, what is the action on skeletal muscle? As we have seen, it causes decreased utilization of glucose, decreased sensitivity to insulin. Excess cortisol can cause breakdown of muscle proteins because they are going to now mobilize amino acids from the muscles. What is the action on GIT? On GIT, it increases the appetite, and also it stimulates lipogenesis in certain adipose tissue. In lungs, very important, it plays a role in production of surfactant. Now we have already studied in the respiratory system, there is a syndrome called respiratory distress syndrome in immature children. In those, there is decrease in the production of surfactant in babies who are born prematurely. And therefore, if a pregnant lady comes to you and you feel that she is going to deliver much earlier than the 9 months, you have to start administering her glucocorticoids so that at least sufficient surfactant is produced in the child and he will not suffer from this respiratory distress syndrome. So this is one very beneficial effect of glucocorticoids on the respiratory system. Now, what are the actions during stress? Yes, it is a stabilizer of homeostasis. Under any stress conditions, these glucocorticoids are given, which can bring about homeostasis. It gives mental, this mental or physical stress like injuries and diseases can also be overcome. Now, what is the action of mechanism during stress? A rise in ACTH levels causes rise in cortisol. Exact role is not known. Glucocorticoids help other hormones to maintain homeostasis by maintaining blood pressure, by causing increase in the blood sugar level, increase in the amino acids, and increase in the free fatty acids. And in short term, these glucocorticoids are life-saving. Remember, very, very important, they are life-saving drugs. If a patient comes to you in dire straits where you have to weigh the bad effects of corticosteroids versus the life of a patient, at that time you have to take the call in favor of life of the patient, and you have to just inject the glucocorticoids if the patient is suffering from a life-threatening inflammatory or allergic condition. There is no other way out, and these are also known as magical drugs because they can relieve the stress instantly. So what is the anti-inflammatory action of glucocorticoids? Now, inflammation due to tissue reaction or infection or physical injury, it can overcome this inflammation. So these glucocorticoids in pharmacological doses, it inhibits proliferation of lymphocytes and monocytes. We have already seen it causes lymphocytopenia and monocytopenia.
It decreases production of prostaglandins, interleukin, TNF, which is tumor necrosis factors, inhibits phospholipase A2 release, that is release of arachidonic acid products. All in all, it decreases the immune response. Not only this, it also will decrease the capillary permeability. Now, in this inflammatory condition, if you see the patient, say having inflammation of a say forearm, whatever for whatever reason, it will be appearing reddish because of the inflammation. Not only that, it will be swollen because of increasing capillary permeability because of inflammation. In such patients, if you give such glucocorticoids, it will immediately try to overcome this inflammation, as well as it will decrease the capillary permeability. So all the reddishness as well as the swelling will be gone in few minutes. Not only this, glucocorticoids in pharmacological doses also causes stabilization of lysosomal membranes. Thus, it decreases the release of hydrolytic enzymes, which is desirable. It causes decrease of migration of leukocytes to the site of inflammation. So this is also a desirable action. It decreases the collagen formation and proliferation of fibroblasts. So the scar that was going to be formed at the site of injury, that scar size is going to be decreased. So under such acute conditions where one has to take call between saving the life of the patient and other bad effects of glucocorticoids, you have to go definitely in favor of the glucocorticoid therapy at that particular period of time. Yes, just as I said, use of glucocorticoids is justified in certain inflammatory conditions. Which are those? Conditions like, say, rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatic fever, acute glomerulonephritis, and many other conditions. Otherwise, very important sentence, use of steroids makes the patient feel better. At the same time, it does not remove the cause. It causes immunosuppression and it causes inhibition of scar formation. So remember, for immediate stress relief, it is important. But once the patient comes out of this life-threatening conditions, then you have to slowly stop glucocorticoids. Now a patient comes to you with an inflammatory condition and you give him glucocorticoids and it will suddenly improve his condition and he will say, wow, what a good doctor you are. But remember, this is just a deceptive impression of improvement, because if the cause of inflammation or allergy is not cured, it is going to come back with double vigilance once you stop the glucocorticoids. So remember, whenever you are going to stop the glucocorticoids, you have to stop it in tapering doses slowly. Now, in some cases, immune reactions are undesirable. For example, say in allergy, in certain hypersensitivity to certain drugs, autoimmune diseases, or rejection of a transplant. Now here, we don't want immune reactions to happen because that will lead to further deterioration of our motive. So in such cases, pharmacological doses of glucocorticoids are used. Large doses of cortisol causes atrophy of lymphoid tissue. It inhibits interleukins, especially interleukin 1, interleukin 2, and interleukin 6. It suppresses cell-mediated immunity and humoral immunity, and therefore it is used in treatment of acute bronchial asthma, especially in status asthmaticus. Status asthmaticus is a condition where the asthma has gone to a very severe level. Eczema is a serious condition, inflammatory condition, where it is affecting the skin. SLE is also known as systemic lupus erythematosus. There is another condition called serum sickness. Now I will not go into the pathophysiology of SLE and serum sickness, but for the time being, remember, these are certain immune reactions which are undesirable. Also in rheumatoid arthritis and for prevention of transplant rejection. For example, if you say transplant a kidney of a patient to the recipient, and there are certain signs where the recipient's body is trying to impose an immune response against the donor's kidney. At that time, one has to administer glucocorticoids to cause immune suppression, because we don't want the graft to be rejected because of the immune reaction. Slowly, over a period of time, it is quite likely that the donor will not mount an immune response, and it will gradually accept the graft from the recipient, from the donor, sorry, I should say. Yeah. What is the anti-allergic action? Now we have already seen that it causes decrease in the circulating eosinophils by causing sequestration in spleen and in lungs. It also decreases basophils in circulation. It decreases the histamine release. It reduces inflammation associated with allergy, and therefore in allergic conditions like bronchial asthma, these glucocorticoids are used. Now you must have seen people commonly using those glucocorticoid puffs, where they inhale the capsule by using that specific puffs. They inhale it by mouth, not by nose, but by mouth. And such puffs are very important, or are routinely used by the patients who are suffering from bronchial asthma. And the main pathophysiology behind this is that it is causing depression of eosinophils, basophils, and histamine, and therefore this anti-allergic action of glucocorticoids is very important. So just to summarize the effects of glucocorticoids in one figure, let us try to figure out. Okay, so cortisol, it facilitates maturation of the fetus. It increases the GFR and it brings back the decreased blood pressure back to normal. It modulates emotional tone and wakefulness. It maintains muscle function and decreases the muscle mass. It causes increase in the bone resorption in excess doses. It decreases the connective tissue. It inhibits the inflammatory and immune response. While at the same time, it maintains cardiac output, increases the arterial tone, decreases the endothelial permeability, and therefore all in all, it brings back the decreased blood pressure back to normal. So I have already told you that glucocorticoid concentration is maximum in the morning. So this chart in Guyton typically shows you how this cortisol concentration is picking up at the time of awakening, from 4, 6, and at 8. This cortisol concentration is highest. Now I have already one thing slightly outside physiology I would like to tell you. Now we have seen that the incidence of myocardial infarction is more in the morning as compared to evening. Now this is one of the reason why the incidence of myocardial infarction is slightly more in the morning. Why? Because the cortisol, it is going to increase the blood pressure, isn't it? Yes, we have already seen it. It is the ECF volume and increase in the blood pressure. If a person, especially above the age of 40, if he or she is going to exercise in the morning, when the cortisol concentration is already high, which is already causing increase in the blood pressure, then that person, especially in elderly age groups, is prone to suffer from this myocardial infarction because of the less blood supply to the cardiac muscle. So remember, there are many studies which are advocating that a person, say above 40 or 45 years of age, they should do evening walks rather than the morning walks. So this is one of the reasons why I am not saying that people from your age group should not wake up in the morning and go for jogging. This is only for more relevant with elderly age groups, where the people are more prone or more likely to suffer from myocardial infarction. Therefore, the more and more studies are coming which advocate use of evening walks rather than the morning walks. So with this, we will end today's lecture. But remember, which are the likely questions which can be asked on this topic. So let us start with this. First of all, let us start with our own MCQs. Excessive secretion of aldosterone results in, this question was asked in a university exam, metabolic acidosis, respiratory acidosis, metabolic alkalosis or respiratory alkalosis? Yes. What can be the likely answer of the three, or rather of the four? Sorry. So as we have seen in the initial part that this aldosterone causes increase in reabsorption of potassium. At the same time, it gives away H plus ions. So if excess secretion of aldosterone is there, it will reabsorb sodium, but at the same time, it will cause excretion of hydrogens. Therefore, it will lead to condition that is metabolic alkalosis. Which one of the following is secreted by zona reticularis? Aldosterone, androstenedione, 9-alpha-fluorocortisol, or deoxycorticosterone. So as we know that zona reticularis is mainly concerned with secretion of this adrenal androgens. So the correct answer here is androstenedione. Which are the short answer questions that can be asked to you on this topic? Say, classify and enumerate hormones of the adrenal cortex. I am talking about 2 marks question, short answer questions. So you should be able to classify them into mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and androgens, and you will also have to enumerate which are the hormones which come under each subcategory. Short answer question can be what tell the actions of aldosterone, or give an account of glucocorticoid action on carbohydrate metabolism. So maybe this can be framed something like this. The next question answer session can be short notes. The short notes can be asked on cortisol, aldosterone, say regulation of secretion of aldosterone, or immunosuppressive action of glucocorticoids. So short notes can be asked on any of these topics. What are the long questions? Describe synthesis, secretion, mechanism of action and actions of cortisol. Or it can be give a detailed account of synthesis, secretion, mechanism of action and actions of adrenocortical hormones. So whenever a long question comes to you, you have to read it properly, whether they have asked about adrenocortical hormones, where you will have to tell about mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, as well as adrenal androgens, or whether you have been asked only about cortisol. So accordingly, you will write these long questions. So the take-home message from today's lecture, we have already studied what are the various beneficial actions of aldosterone and how it is useful for various actions. Also, we have seen glucocorticoids. We have seen both the white side as well as the gray side of glucocorticoids. How the physiological actions are important, how the pharmacological actions are important, but what care and precautions one should take into account while administering a glucocorticoid therapy. So remember, you have to know each and every action of this adrenal cortical hormones before you start therapy of a patient. So the recommended books and the chapter for reading is chapter number 91, adrenal cortex, very nicely given in this particular chapter. So thank you all, and remember the one important thing. Now the lecture is over. So next step that all students are going to do is that you are going to fill the feedback form immediately, because this is one of the indicators of your attendance. Remember this. So you must fill the form and submit it accordingly. Okay. So all the best. Now we will be continuing with the lecture in the next part of our meeting. Thank you all of you. If you have any queries regarding today's lecture, you can contact me on my personal WhatsApp number. Okay, and I will try to solve all your queries by the time we will take the next lecture. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.